Okay, well, welcome to all of you. We see that you're all logging in. Good morning to Marilyn from Navajo Nation, who's a counselor there, Lisa and everyone there at Pinoleville, Elaine Antone at Comanche, and then Suzanne Malson, who is here sitting next to me, and Winona, who's participating. She's on travel actually to visit a program. And so we want to welcome you here today for this webinar, Conducting AIVRS Consumer Case File Reviews. The presenters for today include myself, Suzanne Malson, and Arden Day, who is our AIVRTAC project evaluator. John, the next slide, please. So as John mentioned, just some general guidelines for participating through Zoom. We would like you to be able to chime in using the chat box to the right of your screen. We would also ask that some of you participate verbally. We may be calling you out by name. We have the registration list, but so please be ready for that to unmute yourself when you are asked to respond to certain questions. Questions, comments, and recommendations are welcome. Everyone's experience is valued. Through this webinar, the AIVRS Case File Review Tool, it's quite an extensive activity, and so we'll be doing a lot of the teaching for this webinar. We may not have the opportunity to respond to all questions, but we will do as much as we can for the time that we have available with you. Okay, next slide. So we have the agenda, conducting AIVRS consumer case file reviews. Today we want to review the learning outcomes with you. We'll actually take you through conducting the consumer case file review using our AIVRTAC tool. That'll be a majority of the presentation. Lastly, the future, we're going to announce the future webinars and conference, save the dates. And then lastly, the end of event evaluation. Next slide, please. Okay, so for today's learning outcomes, upon the completion of the webinar, we want you to be able to demonstrate how to access the AIVRS Case File Review tool through the website. Learning objective 2 is learning about the content itself, helping you identify the evaluation components of the AIVRS Case File Review tool. Learning objective number 3, demonstrating how you understand how to implement the tool itself. Objective 4, developing an understanding of the roles and responsibilities of AIVRS staff with conducting an AIVRS Case File Review. So one thing that we want to impress upon all of you is conducting case file reviews is a very important activity of just overall program management, and it involves everyone at each level of employee who are involved in the program. So talking about the admin assistants, VR counselors, directors, program managers, transition specialists. This really is something that I think unify what you're doing as far as program management. Learning objective 5, developing an understanding of incorporating the use of the AIVRS Case File Review tool as a part of program management. And that's, again, just basically what I stated to you. So in transition, we're going to jump into slide number 6, and I'm going to pass that on to Suzanne.
Thank you, Daryl. And so, good morning, everyone, and welcome. So the question is, why conduct a consumer case file review? And we would like your participation. So in the chat box, please write and enter your response in the chat box to that question. Why conduct a consumer case file review? Waiting to hear from some folks. And we've also put something together on the next slide, but I don't see anybody writing. Did you want to raise your hand and maybe talk?
So Gail Montgomery states to comply with program ruling. So regulations, I'm understanding. Francis, thank you, Francis. You indicate to make sure you're following guidelines. Amber Yates, to make sure your regs are being followed. Again, regulations regarding case management. Thank you, Rachel. Looking at task management of case files, very important. To make sure that all eligibility requirements are met. Thank you, Mary. The compliance, thank you, Marilyn. Janet says that ensuring that all forms and documents are included as defined by the regs and citations. Mark says to ensure case files are correct with regulations and in case of file auditing. Very important point, Mark. Is there a sound to this presentation? Burdette, you might be able to click on your, check your computer system there. It might be your computer that needs access to the Zoom. Other answers: comply with case management specifics, case management tracking, to make sure you're following requirements. So Suzanne, you want to jump to the next slide?
Yes, next slide, John. Your answers are wonderful. To Mary puts in there to evaluate. Pardon me?
Is there a sound to this presentation?
You're talking now. Are you not hearing us? Take the arrow and show them how to get down to the bottom.
Just keep going. And then
Okay. Sorry. So what we identified, the AIVRS team, is to identify case management practices that inform good data collection and data management and data reporting. Next one, please. For AIVRS counselors to assess their own case management practices. Next one, please. Oh, John's doing it. Okay. To develop common case management practices among AIVRS counselors. The next bullet, please. To train new VR counselors and support staff. So when I look at your answers and we look at what the team put together, I think we're on the same page. And so congratulations. We love when you participate. So we're hoping that those of you that are having sound difficulty are getting the help that you need so that you're able to hear us and we're able to hear you. Okay, next slide, please. Are there any more comments, Darold, that you want to respond to?
There's one more bullet.
Oh, okay, to improve program performance and increase employment outcomes. Thank you. So this is the AIVRS case file review tool, and this will be found in the AIVRTech.org website. And basically what we're seeing here and what you will be seeing, and Darold will be walking you through, are all of the identifying criteria that we need. So what slide is this? So this tool it has history and it was developed over time, and everybody participated in it. We are fortunate to have Arden Day, who did a lot of work on this document. And what we're doing right now is just a visual preview to what Darold will be walking you through. One of the things to know is that when you can download this as a PDF and you can print it, and everyone in the office can do case file review using the printed document. It's also available in digital format, and you can open it up. You can download that also, and you can open it up, and you can do the case file review right on your computer, which will save you time because eventually you want it to be in the digital format so that you can compile all of your VR counselors' reviews so that you can get some percentages. So we're excited about having both formats. At this point, I would like to acknowledge the editors of the toolkit, And we're looking at Arden Day, the evaluator for AIVRTAG, Dr. Tom Finch, former RSA Director and Training Service Program Division, August Martin and Sonia Turner, the project officers for AIVRS, Kristen Reinhardt, who is AIVRTAG's project officer, and then we have Cindy Beckman and Kelly Roberts, also affiliated with the Institute for Human Development, and who are helping us. Kelly is our principal investigator, is that right? Mm-hmm. Okay, so we say thank you, and we're going to move on to slide 9. Next slide, please. Thank you, John. So the development of the AIVRS case file review tool, it's a living document, and it's one of those things that we keep going through and developing. So through the technical assistance, the AIVRTAG team discovered case management is a common AIVRS program need. And as a former director, I can testify to that. It's something that we enjoy talking with people, and it's hard for us to do all of the paperwork that goes along with it. But this is what holds our program together, so it's something we really need to focus on. Developed for AIVRS program to conduct internal reviews, and it's a guide previously developed instrument by Dick Corbridge. And from some of the old timers that have been around for a little bit of time, remember Dick Corbridge, had worked with Dick Corbridge, and he left behind wonderful documents. So our case file review document is taken from his original. It addresses, we have something that popped up, thank you. It addresses the stages of the VR process, including eligibility, IPE development, IPE implementation, state partnerships, and confidentiality. And when Darold starts going through the tool and Arden starts explaining some of it, you will see this, and it will all make sense. It will all come together. Can be used individually or jointly between AIVRS directors, managers, VR counselors, and staff. Everyone needs to be trained on it. Everyone needs to be exposed to it and be able to work in the document for the best of your programs. Next slide, please.
Okay.
And I'm going to turn that over to Darold.
Okay, so as we indicated, and you'll see on the screen there in the chat box, John was able to upload the link of the AIVRTAG.org's products and tools website. If you click on that link, it'll actually take you to a list of tools, and I think either the second or third tool down is the AIVRS case file review. And essentially what you're seeing on the screen here in the PowerPoint are the directions on that tool itself, paraphrased to some degree. So, you know, as managers, directors, as program staff, when you're thinking about conducting a case file review, you want to think about several different things in implementing the tool. One is, first of all, to open up the tool itself, become familiar with the questions, understand how those questions are in alignment with the rules and regulations for compliance of your case management. If you're doing case management primarily through software programs, think about where you would find the answers to these questions through the software. If you're doing case management strictly through hard copy paper and case file systems, then think about where, again, within your case files, where you would find the answers to these questions. Next is determine your guidelines for using the tool. It's amazing that our experience with technical assistance and providing particularly intensive technical assistance to AIVRS programs is, as Suzanne mentioned, case management is one of the #1 requests in terms of asking that question, what are we doing? Are we doing it well? What do we need to improve on? How do we collect our data? How do we record our data? And then what does that do to inform your staff roles and responsibilities? And so in that sense, when you're determining the guidelines for the use of this tool, think about it as, you could identify a sample set of files or individual files. So for example, a VR counselor is interested in whether or not he or she is conducting accurate case management. They could print out the form and complete a case file review individually. As a program, if you decided that, hey, listen, we want to do a sample of our case files to see what we're doing across the board, you take a sample set of files, do a small number of your files and then identify what you're learning, some common themes through those activities. Again, if it's done in a group review, there's a lot of group learning that occurs as you're doing this tool. We've learned through our intensive technical assistance, and those of you who are registered have probably participated in this, is oftentimes we'll sit together, review the questions, and conduct the case file review together. And in that process, group learning occurs because questions develop. What is eligibility determination? Is there a specific form for eligibility determination or clarification about guidelines or requirements of what needs to be discussed during the process in VR, from intake to eligibility to IP development, then to employment. So those questions really take place in this group learning atmosphere. Again, decide whether or not you want to use the PDF. Some people are comfortable with doing paper pencil activities, or decide if you want to do the Excel version that's available to complete on your computer itself. And then identify case file numbers for improved management of data collection. It's important that when you're collecting this data, your case file review tool can connect back to a file itself in the case that you want to go back and make the changes or improvements to those discrepancies that you're finding as you're completing the case file review tool. The other thing that is very important, and you'll see throughout our tool, is this reminder that our clients or consumers' information is confidential. And any transference of information, there always has to be a release of information form signed by that consumer. So this is a very important process throughout all of case file review. If you're asking for information, if you're sharing information, it's always a good reminder as a program and as individual staff, you check for those documents to be updated and present in the file. So moving on to step number 2, I'm going to pass it on to Suzanne.
Next slide, please. Thank you, Darold. So when we're conducting the review, step 2, what you want to do is you're going to select a case file to review and complete the demographic portion of the tool. And when Darold does this physically with you, you will see how this comes together. Then begin with completing each section of the questions in the tool. There will be yes and no answers. I don't know, and are appropriate answers when reviewing. There's also a comment area where comments confirm evidence of good strategies and provides direction to make improvement with case management. So what you're looking at in this initial stages is when you're trying to fill out the case file review, are your forms complementary to answering the questions, and would an external evaluator be able to find it? It's one thing, everyone that uses your documents and case management, but it's another when you have somebody come in and look at it. So keep that in mind when you're looking at step 2. Next slide, please, John. Which is number 12. So the next thing you'll be doing is review the data results for the percentages of required indicators met. And the indicators are basically you do an annual report every year, and you will be able to find it will be those percentages, those numbers. But when you're doing it in the case file review, it does appear in a different way, and Arden will be able to show you some of this. Identify the practices by VR counselors that contribute to the indicators met with high percentages. So it's a way of comparing and contrasting and looking at who may need a little bit more education or training in something specific to your program. Identify indicators being met with low percentages and identify possible explanations for low percentages. And when you identify it, you have a challenge. What's the solution? So when you're looking at it, don't look at it as you're getting bad marks. Look at it as you're finding new areas to work on and improve what the strengths of your program. Develop consistency, and this is really important to set those targets and develop a case management plan to achieve high percentage indicators. I can't stress how important this particular piece is and how the document, the case file review form, can help with this. Because if everybody has the same information and everybody is agreeing that they're going to be following this case file review and using it as a monitoring tool, it can't help but to bring consistency and improve your numbers. And then implement your plan and set the timeline to follow up by conducting a second case file review. We recommend 6 months because you have an annual report. So if you do 6 months, you're already preparing and doing what you need to do to help you to do your annual performance report, but then to make the changes you need to do better in your program management. And I'd like to turn this part over to Darold.
Thank you, Suzanne.
Mm-hmm.
So just to add a little bit more to that, we just took you through step 1, 2, and 3. Again, that's as you're seeing on the screen, the top visual there, the AIVRS case file review introduction. Just following the introduction, you'll find those steps 1, 2, and 3, and I'll open it up in a minute. But the other thing that I did want to add to considering what you do before, what you're doing during, and what you're doing after this case file review, there are certain things that we've found to be very conducive to the success of implementing a case management plan after the review. And those characteristics I'm talking about are related to your team dynamics. When doing an activity like this and you want to bring your full staff on board, it's so important to have a level of transparency and trust, and then good communication between one another as staff members so that you can communicate with each other some ideas and strategies for addressing those indicators that have low percentages or those that you want to maintain as high percentages. So, think about that as you're moving forward. The other thing that we've learned through ITA working with sites is that there's also needs to be some consistency to allow staff members to come together through a team meeting, whether that's weekly, bi-weekly, monthly, to do a debrief and to help one another in terms of improving case management skills. So going back to the screen here at the PowerPoint, you're using your AIVRS case file review tool. And again, generally you can click on aivrattac.org. I'm going to go to the link in the chat box. And then, John, I'm going to ask you to let me take over the screen so I can share my screen. Let's see here. Okay, so here's my screen. If I go to, let's see Okay, so here's the link that John sent. I'm going to click on that, and it's going to take me to the AIVRS website. I'm going to close Ask Me Later. Here's the, oops. Here's the website. And, oh, actually it was the first tool. So we have the listing of products and tools. There's the case file review tool there. It provides a brief description, the directions, and then the most updated draft, which actually was this past week in April. We have the Word file and the Excel file. If I open up the Word, it should open up in a PDF. Oh, I must have clicked on that one. This is a new computer, so it's opening up all these extra windows that I'm not familiar with. So here's I guess the Excel version here. Here's step 1, beginning of the review, conducting the review. Step 2, reviewing the results and follow-up. Step 3, and then the anticipated outcomes. So as we go through the file itself, I'm going to open up a sample case file here. And what we have here is a completed sample case file using the Excel document. Okay, and as I mentioned before, you can print this out in a PDF and essentially handwrite your responses in as well. So we're going to go through today, and if you have any questions, please interject through the chat box, ask those questions. Suzanne has a computer here that she can see the questions. If we need to address that immediately, we can do that. So the sample single AIVRS case file review tool, this form can be completed electronically or printed and completed by hand. The program, so at the top you want the demographics, program name, the date reviewed. So for example, I put the AIVRS program, we have the date reviewed 1/1/2019, the name of the reviewer. This is important so that if you have any questions, you can go to that reviewer and ask, you know, why was this question answered one way or the other? Is the case open or closed? So as an example, some programs decide to include closed files to see how the history of case management has occurred. They'll also include files that are developed that may not currently have an IPE. So to account for that, that question is there. Is the case open or closed? And then if it's closed, what type of closure occurred? And so you'll go in there and be able to do the drop-down menu and click on any one of those closure types. Additionally, here's the case file number. Here I put January 1st, 2019. As we move to the questions of the toolkit, of the case file review, we have sections. We have section A, which is the eligibility section. I'm going to scroll down to section B, IP development, and then scroll down even more to shared case. Is this a shared case with a state VR? And then lastly, the overall question of confidentiality. So we're going to go through this one by one, and I'm going to highlight some areas for consideration when you're talking about case management planning. And keep in mind, this is a single case file. So looking at one data set, you can do this across multiple files. We recommend typically 10 to 15% of your files to review if you're doing a group file review. And then the other thing is that what you want to do after you're completed with a review is really understand the data. How do you transfer this information into and understandable format to inform case management practices, to inform what VR counselors' roles and responsibilities are, to inform professional development planning, and directors identifying those resources for their staff so that they can improve their case management. So kind of think about those outcomes as we're going through these questions. So Section A, eligibility, you have a signed ROI saying it's needed to obtain relevant information regarding eligibility. Question number one, is there a signed and dated AIVRS application for services? So again, there's a drop-down menu there. For this case file, the answer is yes. And keep in mind here is the comment boxes. If I wanted to add something in here and say, yes, the applicant submitted completed form on April 23rd. So the importance of this tool is that when you have comments, if you're a director asking your VR counselors, you can refer to the comments and it'll help you connect the dots. What is it that you're finding specifically in this case file, but also how are the counselors or the reviewers connecting the dots to answer these questions. So we highly encourage that when you're using this tool to utilize the comments as much as possible. So question 1A, if yes, please write the date of the application in the comments section. So here's the date. If no, please explain in comments section. So if there is no signed application, you want to determine what the reason for that is and provide that explanation there. Number 2, is the applicant a member of the federal or state recognized tribe? Answer yes, no, and then any comments. Again, this is all the eligibility criteria, so it's covering those 5 components. Question 2A, are supporting documents provided? So for example, is there a tribal ID card, such as a CID? We have a little note here that the CDID is only used as supporting documentation if it is what is used by the tribe to determine membership. A letter should be requested from the tribe stating that the CDID is the tribe's method of membership. So that's just a little bit of guidance for you if you have your methods in-house at your tribe to support the membership, use those guidelines. Question number 3, does the applicant live on or near the reservation and in the designated service area? Typically that's a yes. Well, it should be a yes. And then are supporting documents provided? So sometimes, we all live in different geographical areas. Sometimes we have individuals who are applicants that might live outside the service area but are tribal members. You want to verify that they're actually living within that designated service area. To help support that, you might want to ask for the address on the utility bill. I know in the Hopi villages, we don't specifically have any street names. So consumers will come in and draw a map of the location of their home and the village name. So, what are the supporting documents that you request from those applicants to support the eligibility criteria of living on or near the service area? So question number 4 actually has 3 parts to it. So the question is there a case note or documentation that indicates the applicant or representative has been notified in writing of the following rights? So we're looking at rights. Very important to integrate this throughout your full VR process, from intake all the way into IP development, all the way into closure, so that they're constantly being informed of their rights. So are they informed of an impartial due process during the eligibility phase? In this case, the answer was yes. The reviewer indicated the AIVRS counselor documented this in their case notes. So if I don't see a specific form about impartial due process, then I might look in the case notes, and that's where I'll find this conversation. Section B, to pursue services from the client assistance program. It looks like in this case file review, there was no evidence found in the case notes or IP documents that CAP was available and communicated to the consumer. So thinking about that, when you're talking about completion of this review, this is one area you might want to go back to and say, is this an individual circumstance with this case file? Or is it something that we're finding commonly throughout our cases? And what do we need to incorporate into our process to improve and change the answers from no to yes? Section C, that all personal information collected will be treated as confidential. In this case, the answer was yes. The reviewer indicated a general statement addressing due process and confidentiality is on the application form and signed by the consumer. The AIVRS program provides a copy of rights and responsibilities to each applicant. So again, it might tell me they're doing parts A and C, but maybe going back to say, let's include CAP into this general statement. Let's include it on the application. Let's look at it, include it in the form for their rights and responsibilities for each applicant. So how do you use this information to inform what you're doing as a program? Question 5, does the applicant have a documented mental or physical impairment? Review correspondence and our case notes to ensure there is documentation of the disability or impairment included in the case file. In this case, the answer was yes. Found in case notes interview, supporting evidence provided by medical reports. Part A, 5A, does the impairment cause substantial impediment to employment? Here the answer is no. Indian Health Service medical records and case notes. So does the impairment cause substantial? If the answer is no, then why is that no? Okay. Please explain in the comment section to any program document such as a severe disability statement form. Please review case notes on intake interview to ensure there is a clear indication in the case file of how the consumer's disability or impairment affects potential employment. So you might learn from further investigation that, say we're a program that's paper and pencil, we might be missing a form document that has an eligibility statement. And as an auditor or as a experienced counselor and director, we might be looking for that one form that is the eligibility form that indicates this impairment is a substantial impediment to employment. So, you know, again, another example of going back to the no questions and investigating, why are we answering no? And what's missing or what do we need to do to improve that category? Question number 6, does the applicant require VR services to achieve an employment outcome? So again, in the case notes and other areas, the answer for this is yes. It was found in the determination of eligibility form and the case file. Question number 7, was the applicant determined eligible within 60 days of the application or agreed to an extension of time? In this case, the answer was no. If I were, say, a director or a counselor reviewing this review, then I'd be saying it would have been nice to have a comment there. If I go to Part A, please write the date of eligibility. This is where the comment is. In the comment section, the date of eligibility was 3/8/2018, and if I go back up to the application, signed application question, which is at the beginning of the form, right here, and I look at the eligibility determination, it looks like it was 67 days past. And then we didn't see any notes in the case notes stating there was a request for an extension and those reasons for the extension, or there wasn't any communication to inform the consumer about this delay in determining eligibility. So again, another example of going back to what are we doing as a program? Is that consistent among our applications? Are we consistently going above the 60 days? Are we consistently meeting these eligibilities within 30 days? You know, what are those parameters and targets you want to set as a program to address eligibility? I don't know if there are any questions coming in.
Amanda Ray has a question. What if the applicant has a documented disability and has a job already that they are satisfied with versus wanting to get a better job or full-time employment, or change the job from program assistant to a more supervisory position? We have this coming up more and more.
That's Amanda.
That's Amanda, yes.
Hi, Amanda. Unfortunately, that is a specific case management question in regards to situations consumers can be in, and it's a very relevant one. And we will respond to that through the listserv. For the moment, we want to stay focused on the aspects of each compliance component through this consumer case file review, but those are the type of questions that will come up as a team that you can address. What do we do in these situations? Is it in our policies and procedures? Are we responding to those situations consistently as VR counselors?
And did the disability change?
And did the disability change? So there are several areas to look at that, and that would probably be a whole new webinar in terms of case management and vocational goal development. And amendments.
She said, thank you, sorry for jumping ahead.
No, that's okay. We appreciate it, Amanda. And those kind of questions, you're coming up with them, so please just put them in the chat box because we want to document them and then address those
at some point.
Yes.
So that's really good.
Yes. Okay, so section B, IPE development. Is there evidence that the consumer and VR counselor work together to develop the IPE? So typically, of course, you want signatures from both the consumer and counselor on those documents. You want to review the case notes to ensure that this communication is happening and documented between the consumer and the counselor. So in this case, the answer was yes, it was found in the case notes. Is the vocational goal, and this is where Amanda's coming in, is the vocational goal consistent with the consumer's, I know some of you call it the Great 8, strengths, resources, priorities, concerns, abilities, capabilities, interests, and informed choice. Please provide a brief description of evidence. So in this case, the answer was yes, that it aligned with the Great 8, but there's no comments. As a director or someone referring back to this review, I would have appreciated comments to be included in there so I could understand how they're linking and connecting the dots. Question number 3, does the consumer IPE clearly describe the vocational rehabilitation services needed to achieve an employment outcome? Again, what are those services? Is it listed? In this case, the answer was yes. Part A, is the employment outcome provided in an integrated setting? In this case, the answer is yes. Okay. Part 4, is there evidence that assistive technology needs were addressed? Review case notes to ensure the intake and IP address and the IP address whether or not AT is required. Consider using an ROI or necessary. So if you look at question number 4 and 5 asked about personal assistance services were addressed. The answers are no and no. No comments here, but we should know that for every consumer, we should be discussing assistive technology and personal assistance, right? So this answer could be, if I changed it and said, yeah, this person addressed it, I could say yes, but this service is not needed, possibly because we did an AT assessment and there was no need for assistive technology. So we're indicating, yes, we did address this. So you can go back and forth in that. And then again, it relates back to how you're implementing your VR process and IP development. So getting up to question number 6, Were the timelines for the consumer achieving the employment outcome clearly identified in the IPE? In this case, the answer was yes, okay? Were the timelines for the initiation of services clearly identified in the IPE? So again, so when you're laying out specific services, say you have traditional healing, counseling and guidance, transportation, those are all your services. Are they included in there? In this case, it's your assigned annual IPE. And then part 8, question 8 is, were all the dates to start each consumer service clearly stated in the IPE? The answer is yes. Each consumer service provided has a unique start date. Sometimes in ITA, when we're doing ITA, what we found in case folders is that there is a generic start date for all services, and there's a generic end date that's the same for all services, meaning each one of those services will be provided for that duration of time when that necessarily isn't the story for that consumer. So you want to be sure that you're identifying services that are unique and have their unique start and end dates. And that's question 8 and question 9.
You have a comment? Amanda Yates, to everyone, we are looking forward to the answer on Amanda's question on the listserv. I have a comment that I would like to reiterate. As Darold is going through this and he's showing you the questions, the answers, and the way to comment, one of the things that the reality is, if you are self-monitoring and you can find it, think about, could an external evaluator find these answers easily? And if not, how do you come together as a program to address that situation? I just wanted to reiterate that because that's an important piece. Thank you.
Okay. And I'm going to speed up a little bit to get through these questions so we can bring Arden on board to talk about the meat and potatoes in terms of how do you use the data you learn from completing this form. So I'm going to try to wrap this up in about another 5 minutes. Question 10A, is there a clear description of methods to procure such services? So again, who's responsible for procurement? Is that the AIVRS program? Is it the social service provider, etc.? In this case, the reviewer, the VR counselor indicates who is responsible for procuring each service. Question number 11, is there a clear description of how progress toward an employment outcome will be evaluated? Please provide evidence, short-term, long-term, clear case notes to document progress, objectives of the IP, benchmarks listed, etc. In this case, the answer was no. Again, another area to go back to and ask, what is it that we're doing that we can improve? Question number 12, do the IP and corresponding case notes clearly describe terms, conditions, and responsibilities of? So again, getting back to comparable services, the consumer is involved in that. What are their responsibilities? The answer is yes. Any third-party agency, in this case, they didn't indicate what the third-party agency will be providing and what they're responsible for. C, the AIVRS program in relation to an employment outcome. In this case, the answer was yes. It outlined the responsibility of the AIVRS program. Question number 13, does the consumer have a significant disability that might involve a supported employment setting? Review case notes to ensure they describe the setting and reasoning. So in this case, the answer was no, but you will have individuals who come in with more significant disability that might have the need for a supported employment setting. 13A, so since this person did not have a significant disability requiring the service, that was not applicable. Question 14, was the consumer informed that post-employment services are available if required and upon request? Review case notes to ensure they describe the post-employment service conversation. So in this case, the answer is no. And it might be no because maybe they didn't complete the 90-day successful closure. But then you also want to pay attention to indicate as a program, is it important that they are notified of post-employment services being available upon successful closure? What is your procedure? What's that plan you have as a program? Number 15, is there clear evidence that the consumer and or representative signed the IP and were provided a copy of the IP? Yes, in this case, the signed IP by the AIVRS consumer has a statement about receiving a copy of the IP. So generally on the last page, signature page, there's a statement that covers this for compliance. Question number 16, is there clear evidence that an annual review of the consumer IP took place and amendments to the IP were made as needed? In this case, the answer was yes. Maybe as a director or counselor, I might want to say, if the answer is yes, then that means there might be another annual IP, there might be an amendment. I want to know those reasons. So comments are important. Question number 17, is there evidence that culturally appropriate services were provided to the consumer throughout the provision of services? Review activities listed in IP as well as case notes for evidence of culturally appropriate services. So in this case, generally, this is an interesting conversation when we do ITA with all programs that we're serving. And generally, your answer is always going to be yes, particularly because you're located within a reservation community, and the values of that community should be infused into your program services. So culturally appropriate could be anything as small as greeting one another in the language. It could be accommodating appointments due to ceremonial participation. So thinking about some of those cultural characteristics of your community, if you're adjusting and accommodating those community values, then this answer should typically always be yes, okay? Question, so getting into the next section, share case with state VR. Again, there's a reminder to obtain an ROI before sharing information about consumers. We have three sections, 2 questions. First one was, was there a state VR agency involvement in this case? The answer for this is no. Review case notes to ensure they demonstrate that the consumer was offered state VR services. So sometimes, you're located in an area where, that opportunity is there. In this case, the answer was no. If yes, is there clear evidence in the IP that this case was shared with the state VR agency? So sometimes you'll have 2 IPs in cases that they're shared, one from the state, one from your program. And if you look at the services within both IPs, you should share in common a coordinated plan between you and the state program. In this case, because they answered no, that was not applicable. Number 2, is there a clear evidence that the state agency contributed to the consumer vocational rehabilitation costs? Again, this would go up to the previous section in the IPE about responsibility of a third-party agency. In this case, they were not shared, so the answer is not applicable. And then lastly, we have the confidentiality, and we talked with our partners and project officer through RSA about this role of confidentiality, and we've had this conversation with multiple programs about confidentiality. And so it's included here as, are there ROIs for each of the above noted categories where information about a consumer is shared between or across specific agencies? Just ensuring that, those ROIs are in the case file, they're signed, they're updated between you and other agencies where you're exchanging information about consumers. In this case, the answer was yes, and the comments say signed ROIs are in the case folder from Behavioral Health Services and the local school agency. So meaning that they were sharing information back and forth between those 2 agencies. So we may not be able to answer the questions now, but for each sections that we went through, if you have any questions, please add them to the chat box. At this moment, I'm gonna transition and allow Arden to introduce herself and then speak about the next section, which is evaluating
You have one question.
the data. Yes.
There is a question from Gail Montgomery, and it says, Arden just lost connection. She'll get back on in a minute. The question is, can client double dip to both state VR and tribal VR? It's not considered double dipping when you are collaborating. So you have this cloud, you have two, you might have one IPE, or you may have two. And the thing is that the state will put, you come together and you talk about what is the program, tribal program going to provide, and what is the state going to provide. So therefore, it's not considered double dipping, because you're just reaching out to the state to probably provide the more expensive items that a consumer may need in order to be successful. I hope that, did that answer the question, Gail? Yes, okay, good, thank you.
Okay. Do we have Arden
Is
back on?
Arden back on? We're getting some questions here.
Okay, I'll pull up the chat.
Hi, sorry, I'm back on. I'm
Great.
going to use my phone as a hotspot because we lost Wi-Fi here.
Arden, as you get set up, we're reading comments. So as soon as you're set up, I'm going to stop sharing my screen so you can pull up yours. And then just let us know when you're ready.
Okay, so Christopher asked, but we are supposed to coordinate services so that clients don't receive the exact same services from both programs. Exactly, that is the answer. Amber writes again, we printed off the PDF from AIVRS website, and it does not include the confidentiality section. That's because we're in a revision state. I thought we had it, the new one up there. Our document is considered a live document, just like your policy and procedures, and we are going through an update. So if you don't have it now, it will be up there. Arden can answer that. I thought it was supposed to be up there.
It'll be up by the end of today. We apologize for that.
It won't be up by the end of today. The only two that are available are the Word and the Excel. The PDF will be available after we make it accessible. So that's right now you can access the Word file and the Excel file.
Okay, thank you.
Oh, thank you. Winona asked, Amber, when did you print? Oh, well, and I think she's answering the question. Jackie asked, we meet with the other VR counselors in order to duplicate services. Do not duplicate, thank you. Yes, thank you.
How are we doing, Arden?
Are you ready, Arden?
Yep, I am ready. Sorry about that, guys. I don't know what happened here, but I very briefly lost my internet access, so that was fun. There's a lot of minor cursing happening on this end. Okay, so sorry about that. So I'm gonna go over, if we're ready, I'm gonna go over some of the sample results. So we pulled together just some pieces to share with you what you might see after doing a case file review. So whenever we go on site, and by we, I mean Darold and Suzanne and all of the rest of the lovely AIVRS personnel, not usually me, whenever they go on site and they work with different programs to do this case file review, we'll pull a sample of case files to look at. So, and clearly there will be a specific ROI so that we can do this, and we'll have to follow proper procedure and do all of those nice fancy things. But this is my piece, which is pulling everything together so that you have some nice results to look at. Usually if you've done a sort of group learning activity like Darold mentioned earlier, a lot of these results aren't going to be all that surprising, but if you've done them individually or some other way, then sometimes you can come up with some different patterns. So before I get into this real quick, I want to explain something that Suzanne mentioned earlier. So, and just let me know.
Indicators.
Huh?
Indicators. I think
Yep, so those required indicators, I actually, to avoid some unnecessary confusion, I took a piece of this off. So I'm gonna, it's still here, I'm gonna unhide it real quick just so you can see what we're talking about. So there's this piece, which is that required indicators that Suzanne mentioned. And I should say that required indicators is actually my term. It is not, like wasn't an RSA term. And it just applies to this case file review document. And required indicators are just things that we would expect every case file that we look at to have. So we would expect every case file that we look at to have a signed and dated AIVRS application, right? So you would expect every case file that you look at should have that. And as long as they're, you know, far enough into the process. And every case file you look at, every person that applies, or every consumer that's makes it past that application eligibility stage, everyone should also be a member of a federally or state recognized tribe. So that would be considered a required indicator. You can't see me, but I'm using quotations around that term right now because it is, again, my term, not an RSA term, just a term that applies to just this document. So, but something that might not be a required indicator, if we scroll further down in this document to like the IPE section. So Darold mentioned this assistive technology piece. So I wouldn't expect all case files, while all case files should probably address assistive technology with their consumer to address whether or not that consumer needs it, I wouldn't expect for every case file to have evidence that their training is needed around that piece, because not every consumer needs training for assistive technology, because not every consumer needs assistive technology. So that's the difference between those required indicators and not. I can't see the chat right now, so I don't know if someone has a chat.
no more questions.
Okay. So I just wanted to explain that before we moved on.
Thank you.
So, and these required indicator pieces, so part of that is was my goal as an evaluator for this project to really find a simple piece of information that I could pull to look at the overall picture of what was happening with the case files and with that program. But for your guys' use of the case file review in general, what's going to be more helpful is for you to pull things out and look for patterns of responses across your case files. So that's what I'm going to talk about now, to sort of explain that piece and how we start to go through and do that. So we're looking for those patterns of response that exist in the responses. So for this, okay, I'm gonna step back for a second. So the way that we do that is by just counting the number of, I didn't expect to have to include that piece. Okay, so for this example, there were a total of 43 case files that belonged to consumers of all in all of the VR stages. So whether they were in the application phase or the eligibility phase or whatever, there were 43 case files for this program. Of those 43, there were 17 case files that were reviewed for this piece. So AIVRS went in and reviewed, or for this example, they would have reviewed 17 case files. And when we're looking at these responses, I'm going to do a little bit of orienting to this document. So after this piece of just the number of case files total in the program and the number of case files that were reviewed, we just have this question over to the left that Darold sort of went over all of these questions with you guys. And then you have a number, and that number is just the number of times that out of the 17 case files that were reviewed, number of yeses, right? So you had those response options, yes, no, or I don't know. So anytime someone put a yes there in response to this question, we counted it as 1. So you have 16, for this example, we had 16 case files where we responded, yes, there is a signed and dated application for service for this case file, which means that we have this percentage, then is this next piece over here. And there are 94%, that means 94% of the case files, so 16 divided by 17, 94% of case files that were reviewed have a signed and dated application for service. So that's good, right? Because maybe that one last application for service, maybe they just didn't have a date. Maybe that's the one piece that they forgot and they just didn't have a date. Maybe the consumer didn't sign it. So you have sort of these life things that just sort of happen and can usually be easily fixed. And so it's something you want to address, yeah, but it's not necessarily a bad pattern within your case files. So whenever we're talking about looking for patterns in case files, and as we're sort of going through this, we want to think about what the results are telling us and what do the pattern of responses tell you. So do the responses indicate that you need to provide some training to individual staff members or to the team as a whole? Are there areas of your case management that are connected to these pieces that are particularly strong, or maybe that you need to show some signs for improvement? So when we're looking at these percentages over here on the right, we're looking sort of for any percentage that's going to be lower than 80%. So we set 80% as a benchmark to just say that, you know, we really want everything to be at 80% or higher, but we have 20% for, you know, life happens and, you know, things fall through the cracks and maybe you forget to include a date on something every once in a while. So we understand that, try to address those things, but also recognize that they're not a widespread problem throughout the case management pieces. So, making sure I address everything. So for this piece, I highlighted a particular question. So within this eligibility section, if we scroll on down here to number 6, you have, does the impairment cause substantial impediment to employment? And so you have only 47% of the case files that are indicating that yes, this person or this consumer's impairment or disability is causing a substantial impediment to employment. Well, this is one of the requirements for eligibility, right? And so we really need to try to address this. So what exactly is the problem, or what exactly are we seeing with this pattern of low response? So one of the things that, oh, sorry, someone else was jumping in there. So one of the things that you might want to start, that we think about and that we ask the programs that we work with whenever we see this, is what practices are connected with this question, and what things can we improve or change to bring this number up. So I don't know if you guys, I can't see chats right now. I don't know where that is hidden, but one of the things that so one of the things that we were wondering is, and then we came up with some examples, but I would also be interested to hear from you guys, is what do you think could be causing that low percentage? And then what changes would you make to your program if you saw that within your program? So I've got some examples that I can share, but I'd also be interested to hear what you guys had to say.
So if you guys can respond to Arden's question in the chat box as to what might be causing the low percentage here for question number 6.
And Darold just printed it out for you.
Yeah.
What factors can cause a low percentage for question number 6? Some of you seasoned directors and counselors out there, it'd be great to hear your responses. We know we have Mary out there. I don't know if Carol is on. Christopher, I know you're on. Christopher Zeiler. I'm just calling names out here.
Shelley Jacobs in New York.
Rachel, Serena, Darcy, Tom.
We're waiting.
Amanda, Debbie, James.
Well,
we have a few names here. So what are some of the reasons for question number 8? Here we go.
Here we go. Thank you, Rachel.
Rachel says that some staff may think so long as there is a documented disability, but not necessarily a barrier to employment, they are eligible. Thank you, Rachel. Mary says a certificate of eligibility might lack a description of the functional limitations. Great points, Rachel and Mary.
yeah, those are excellent.
Good.
So some of the things that we came up with is that, you know, staff training and development. So maybe you're looking at improving the knowledge and understanding of how specific disabilities impact employment. So maybe needing to clarify that piece a little bit more. And then also some same case documentation and forms, maybe updating your form. Is there an eligibility form that covers those requirements of eligibility and that sort of accurately describes that section? Is there is that something you can add to make sure that eligibility is addressed appropriately every time for this piece?
Tom Cruise has something.
Cyrus.
I always do that to you, Tom. Sorry.
So Tom says not having a thorough intake interview where the client explains how their disability impacts their ability to find or retain employment.
Excellent.
So that's
Yeah.
kind of answering that question. What can programs do to improve this low percentage? So Tom's answer, you might want to say, what are we doing during intake interview? Are we collecting enough? Do we need to change that? Who's responsible for doing the intake? You know, are appropriate documents collected? So very good points.
Yeah, those are excellent. I really appreciate everyone's knowledge about this.
Yes.
And case notes, don't forget, even when you have a document, your case notes, you know, have to reflect, really understand what you're doing and what you're, you know, who you're working with and what are the disabilities and what are the impairments and how does it affect employment. Yeah. So in general, so this is for this example, the rest of these numbers are relatively high, but they have some areas where they might need to improve that are less than that 80% that we generally look for. But this was one of the pieces that really stood out for their initial case file review as needing some improvement and maybe having some practices around this piece that they could really look at and start to improve and make changes to. But otherwise, they're doing, case file wise, they're doing pretty positive things. They're making sure that they address personal assistance services. They're addressing assistive technology needs. You know, so they've got some areas where they might need to improve, but overall, they're doing a lot of the things that they need to be doing. So, but again, so when we're looking through this, is just looking for that, you know, percentage that is less than 80%. That's what we're doing here. So now for this, I'm going to skip over their post results and just go to their comparison. So for this, we did an initial case file review, and then there was also a follow-up case file review. In the follow-up case file review, there were 10, so it was 6 months later, 6 months to a year later. And so there were only 40 case files at that time. And there were 10 case files that were reviewed for this. So, and again, they've got some really good things. A lot of their case files are doing, they're really making improvements. They're making sure they address all of these pieces. And then if we go down to the piece that, where we were, this number 6 in eligibility that we were talking about before, you can see that they've made some improvements in their case file review results. And so
you know, that might be due to changing some forms. Maybe they updated their forms so that they were a little bit clearer. Maybe they changed their intake process and started doing a more concise or clearer interview for their application. And so you have all of the right questions that you're asking, and you're making sure that you really understand how this person's specific impairment or disability causes a substantial impediment to employment. And so that's a little clearer in their case files. And so you see that improvement in their results too. So, so when we're looking through this, so when you're looking through the initial results, you're looking for those patterns of low results, but then whenever you're looking at the follow-up, you're still looking for those same patterns. But you're also looking to see what's improved and what have we managed to, if practices were already in a good spot, what have we done to maintain those practices and so maintain our sort of good case file review results, and then what have we added to help improve some of these other pieces that were maybe a little bit low to begin with. And so that really, really encompasses a lot of that. So I wanted to pull out just one more piece. Running really low on time. Internet snafu really made things more challenging. Okay, so I'm going to go over this really, really fast. But there was one piece where I was looking at, which was the applicant determined eligible within 60 days of the application, or did they agree to an extension of time? And usually that's, again, recorded in those notes for this. And so they did have a little bit of an improvement in here in these case file review results in this piece. But then there's an additional follow-up to this question, which is, what's the average number of days across all of the case files that you reviewed that people are spending, that people have between that application and eligibility? And so they started out at about an average of 131 days between application and eligibility. And then they dropped it a lot to this, you know, around 66 days between application and eligibility. And so one of the things that I was interested in was looking at this first question improved a little bit, but not a ton, but this changed really dramatically. And so one of the things that I would encourage you to do is you go through, and if you do your case file reviews this way, to really make sure that you understand what's happening within those individual case files. And so that was one of the things that I went back and looked at the notes for this to see sort of what was happening. And one of the things that I found that brought down that number a little bit was that, yes, in general, they're sort of making some improvements and they're bringing down their number, although still just like barely above 60, that 60-day mark. But you also have this weirdo negative number that's happening over here of number of days between application and eligibility, where someone might have determined eligibility before the application date, or maybe it was just a typo and these things are in the wrong spot. So that's something that you want to go back to your case files and really review. Since I don't have access to the case files, this is all I get. And so then I just ask whoever was on site, hey, what was happening with this? So that's something that you really want to understand if you have sort of something that seems a little weird in your results, to make sure that you're going back and reviewing, okay, so why might this have been happening, and what practices, or even maybe there's a data error, and making sure that you understand what's going on with that piece, and asking, sort of further interrogating your data, for lack of a better term. So, okay, I think that is all I had. I know that was kind of a lot in a short amount of time. So,
thank you, Arden. And we are,
I'm gonna click my stop share button.
we only having this hour and a half, and when you have such a wealth of information, it's difficult. Yes.
John, can you pull the PowerPoint back up and go to the last slide, 16? Back up.
Simple slide. Back up, John.
Slide 16. Down.
Next.
Next one. Okay, there we go. Here's one.
Okay, so if we were to do the same process, and we don't have the time for that, but it doesn't mean that you can't put answers in the chat box. So if I ask you, what are the benefits to conducting case file review? Earlier, the question was, why do we do it? Now, what are the benefits? And I'd like you to please put your answers in the chat box. And thank you for that. So what we came up with as a team, it develops confidence with conducting internal case file reviews to monitor your case management practices. Even if there are errors, you correct the errors, and it does build self-confidence, and you're looking at what are your strengths and what are the things that you want to change. It develops the capacity among the AIVRS staff members to understand the importance of making sense of the data for program improvement and recording. It doesn't fall on just the director or program manager. It's everyone's responsibility to greet consumers, to work with consumers, to understand why we're doing what we're doing, right? The case file review informs AIVRS staff development training needs to improve the VR process and case management. If we are doing something and we're doing it over and over again and coming up with the same results, we want something different. We want to analyze what we're doing. We don't want to just keep doing things by rote and not changing. VR is about change. And this informs the roles and responsibility of each AIVRS staff members that are impacted from conducting the review. And I'm sure you have come up with some great ideas in the chat box. I don't see anything yet. Come on, folks, we need your responses, because this isn't about what we're finding out in the field. It's about what we do together. So we're ready for the next slide. Next slide, John. Thank you.
Okay, so thank you, Arden and Suzanne, for presenting the topic on conducting consumer case file reviews. Just a quick note, these are all the strategies, the tools, and conversations we had today, we also have in our intensive technical assistance services. We're currently recruiting for programs to participate in ITA. I believe we have 2 spots available for this fiscal year. We also have additional spots for the next fiscal year. If you are interested in an intensive technical assistance, please contact us when we can talk with you more about it. These are exactly the things we will do while we are on site with you, conducting the pre and post evaluation of your case files. So on the tail end of our presentation, we want to share with you some future dates. Our next webinar is May 28th, provided by Lee Geshioma, Winona, and Wayne Nagel. That's developing your AIVRS program policies and procedures manual. We also have the Talking Circle, June 25th, which will be a culmination of a conversation with these 2 topics, case management and policies and procedures. And lastly, we have our AIVRTAC annual conference in partnership with IHD and the Assistive Technology and Evidence-Based Practices Program. That'll be July 14th, 15th, and 16th in Scottsdale, Arizona. Sunday, July 14th is primarily devoted to AIVRS programs to come together. So please look up on our website and register for the event. We will send more information to you. Next slide, please.
Thank you for those folks writing answers. You're providing great answers to the question. Good job.
Okay, so we want to recognize our partners again, RSA, our project officers, and then if we jump to the next slide, last slide, John. John has the evaluation survey for this webinar. John, can you please post that up into the chat box? So everyone, if you please look at your chat box there, click on the link and complete the brief survey. I will follow up with an email that includes the link as well. We appreciate your comments of what you thought was good about this webinar, any comments on or suggestions to improve the webinar. We thank you all for joining us today. Please contact us if you have any further questions. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you. Great responses. Love your questions. We can't wait to get them all together. Provide them to you. Good job. Thank you.